So, the director of Recovery of an MMO Junkie is, how should I put this delicately? He's a bit of a Nazi. Yeah, I know that word gets tossed around a lot in popular discourse these days in a slightly hyperbolic and sometimes not so hyperbolic fashion, but this is not one of those situations. Director Kazuyoshi Yaginuma's Twitter likes are a sea of Holocaust denial and neo-Nazi rhetoric, and he's also tweeted many anti-Semitic sentiments himself in both English and Japanese. These tweets date back at least as far as 2012, and the fact that he managed to secure a directing role after pushing such a vile ideology probably says a lot about Japanese culture and the country's inclination to sweep its own horrific war crimes under the rug. But that's a topic for another video. Recovery of an MMO Junkie is one of my favorite shows from last year. I think it's very well written and cute, and I've even explicitly praised the direction of the show for being creative and efficient. I would definitely unequivocally say that Yaginuma is a good director, but with the same assuredness I'd also definitely say that he's a bad person. This kind of dissonance when it comes to art is sadly not uncommon. We tend to put artists, especially celebrities, up on pedestals, conflating the quality of their art with the quality of their character and turning them into role models when maybe they shouldn't be. And as the recent string of #MeToo scandals in Hollywood has demonstrated, being a great actor or director doesn't preclude someone from being a shitty person. And this creates an unfortunate conundrum for those of us who study and critique, well, any kind of art really, but especially narrative-focused artwork like books and movies. How are we supposed to take great art, talk about it, and engage with it when it comes from not so great people? I mean, it's not like we can just divorce the opinions of creators from their artwork, especially not in the case of narrative-focused works with a singular creator. When someone is creating a story, of course the way that they view the world is going to inform how characters act or how society functions in that story. It's inevitable. Or is it? Ender's Game is arguably one of the greatest sci-fi novels ever written. Its author, Orson Scott Card, is vocally opposed to same-sex marriage, and his negative views on homosexuality have largely eclipsed the actual merits of his books in popular discourse. They were definitely the driving points in the conversation surrounding the film adaptation of Ender's Game, and it was even boycotted by LGBT groups. You'd expect then that the film or the book itself would be pieces of anti-gay propaganda, but if you've seen or read Ender's Game, then you know that's really not the case. Parts of it can be interpreted that way, but by the same token, there are many who find the story to be empowering. Ender's Game is a story about a young man who is bullied for how he was born, whose existence causes problems for his religious parents, yet he forges his own identity, rises up through his own willpower, and eventually learns to love, understand, and accept beings who at one point seemed alien and hostile to him. It's easy to see how those themes could resonate with, say, a gay youth in a religious household. Judging by what they said at one of the film's promotional events, that's the message that both director Gavin Hood and Harrison Ford, who plays Colonel Graff in the film, took away from the book and tried to draw out in the movie adaptation, which further complicates matters. Ender's Game is already a book from an anti-gay author that can be read to have a message of tolerance, acceptance, and understanding. The film, meanwhile, has dozens of authors: the director, the producers, the composer, the actors who bring each character to life, the production designers, the editors and effects artists, and the cinematographer. All of those people, in using their talents to bring the story to life, had a hand in deciding how it was told and ultimately what it was about. Can you really even say that it's Orson Scott Card's movie after all of that? Even if the text isn't homophobic, are the book and the movie inherently bad because their original creator had those views? And is it worth punishing all of the other people who worked on the film for the views of just one of them? MMO Junkie wasn't just made by one guy either. Yaginuma had a whole animation staff working under him, and the show was adapted from a web manga written by someone who's never expressed anti-Semitic views. As director, Yaginuma certainly had a hand in shaping the tone and message of the series, but he didn't put anything racist in the show itself, and it would be a real stretch to say that it's just his show. So, watching and paying for MMO Junkie or Ender's Game doesn't directly endorse or spread hateful messages, but then that's only part of the equation. Because while these products may not be hateful themselves, supporting them puts money in the pockets of people we know to be hateful, and by increasing their clout as creators, gives them a bigger platform for spouting their ideals, which is troubling to say the least. Nobuhiro Watsuki, the writer of Rurouni Kenshin, is a pedophile. That doesn't bleed over into the text of Kenshin at all, and Kenshin is arguably one of the greatest shonen anime ever made. However, every time someone buys a Kenshin manga or watches the anime, he earns royalties, or at the very least, people who paid him for the license to that content do. So why is that a problem? Because Watsuki was recently charged for possession of child pornography, which he would have had to buy on the black market from the people who made it, and he paid them with money he earned from his manga, which he got from his audience. So, in a very real sense, every Kenshin fan has ended up against their will financially supporting the abuse and exploitation of children. Maybe with just a fraction of a cent, but even that is far too much. So that's just one way that supporting even totally unrelated content created by bad people can support their evil practices. In fact, anyone who buys Kenshin right now is probably directly paying for Watsuki's legal defense. Not that it will do him any good since Japan has a 99% conviction rate, but that's again a topic for another video. But what about how content can win its creators' influence? For an example of that, we need look no further than YouTube, and more specifically at JonTron, a polarizing figure to say the least. While he's said some pretty awful shit, there's almost nothing political about John's videos in themselves. They're mostly just absurd comedic takes on video games and movies that are harmless and pretty funny in their own right. But because of the fame that these videos have won him, John's voice is greatly amplified when he makes hateful, racist, and factually incorrect statements. When he said that wealthy blacks commit more crime than poor whites on a live stream, thousands of people heard him. Even worse, at least some of his fans listened. The archive debate has almost 1 million views on YouTube. Statistically, at least some of those people have to be dumb enough to take what John said as fact, even though it's completely false. JonTron's ideas wouldn't be able to reach so many people if his videos weren't viewed by millions. Heck, he probably wouldn't have the time to think about all these awful things if he didn't earn tens of thousands of dollars from the one video per month that he makes. Our views enable and support the spread of his bigotry, but does that mean that we're morally obligated to stop watching? With garbage people like the Paul brothers or Rice Gum or Leafy is Here, it's easy to dismiss their content based on their personalities because their personalities are the content. If you don't like the one, you probably won't like the other. But it's entirely possible to despise everything that JonTron stands for and still find his Dino City review or his Starcade series or anything else he's made to be hilarious. I mean, I do. JonTron had a massive influence on my sense of humor and my approach to creating this YouTube channel. And while I don't enjoy his current videos as much as I enjoyed his old ones, that's because I disagree with his creative direction, not with his politics. When I'm looking for inspiration on how to do absurdist humor on YouTube right, one of the first places I look to is to his channel, to Dino City Bro, the Malkovich series, and Takeshi's Challenge. And by the same token, if someone asks me in the future how to get anime romance right, I'm probably going to point to MMO Junkie alongside classics like Toradora and Kare Kano because, well, it belongs alongside them. It's that good. Even though by doing so, I'm indirectly exposing more people to Yaginuma's hateful ideas. And that's not just speculation. He's been saying shit like this for years, but it's coming to light now because MMO Junkie is bringing more attention to him. And while it's good that people who will get angry about what he's saying are finally seeing it, that means that more people who might be more receptive to his ideas are also seeing them now as well. But still, this is a show that I think is worth looking at for anyone who wants to talk critically about anime, or tell love stories, or just enjoy a good anime in general for that matter. Because putting aside questions of whether or not a huge number of non-garbage people who also worked on a show should be dragged with the director, should we as an audience miss out on good stories because bad people are involved in telling them? If you want to watch a good anime love story, MMO Junkie will scratch that itch. If you're in the mood for a dramatic tale of swords and samurai, there really aren't many better than Kenshin. Is it right to deny yourself something that you know will make you happy simply because the person who created it is a criminal or is using his fame to forward awful ideas? This might seem like kind of a weak counterpoint to some of you. Many will say that nobody's personal enjoyment should outweigh the moral outrage against the awful things done by these creators. But good anime, films, games, and even YouTube videos can be more than just a way to vapidly pass your time. They can genuinely enrich a person's life, help them connect with others, or inspire them to create themselves. That power of art is a big part of why I make analysis videos in the first place. My girlfriend Yazzie and I watched MMO Junkie almost religiously week to week as it was airing. We adored the show and characters for how they reflected our own relationship and experiences, and we got in a lot of good cuddling while laughing and going aw at some of the sappier moments. And while that might make you throw up in your mouth, for us it was a bonding experience that we wouldn't trade for, well, anything. For almost every work of art that's made by someone horrible, there's going to be someone out there who doesn't agree with them at all, but whose life will be made better for experiencing that art. Should they really deny themselves the opportunity to enjoy that because of the creator's sins? I don't think that's such a cut and dry question. And it gets even more complicated for people who work in or discuss media for a living. If you want to be an anime critic or produce shonen anime and manga, you should probably familiarize yourself with Kenshin at some point because, like it or not, it's hugely influential and popular, with as many sales as FMA, Attack on Titan, and Hunter x Hunter. And while problematic media certainly poses issues for anime critics, it's even rougher for people looking to make or criticize films, and not just because of those recent Hollywood scandals. Roman Polanski is a rapist, and not an alleged rapist like Kevin Spacey or Donald Trump, where someone who's in denial can maybe argue that all of the facts aren't in yet. Roman Polanski was convicted of the statutory rape of a 13-year-old actress in the 1970s. He served some of his time, then fled the country to Europe, where it's alleged he raped and sexually assaulted more girls over the last 40 years. And look, as is the case with literally any famous person who's done something like this, there will be people who argue that there are extenuating circumstances that complicate the issue. Quentin Tarantino. But we know for a fact that Polanski did one of the most horrible things that a person can ever do to another person, and he's been accused of doing it again since then. He is not a good human being. But he is a good director. Arguably one of the greatest directors to ever live. Seriously, Google greatest directors of all time and try to find a list without his name on it. Rosemary's Baby is one of the greatest horror films of all time. And while the Oscars aren't worth much, he earned heaps of praise and awards for The Pianist long after his conviction in 2002. And he's made many more great films beside those, including Chinatown, which is essential viewing for anyone interested in film noir, and probably for anyone who wants to understand film, period. I really can't overstate its importance. Any viewing or discussion of Polanski's work should definitely have a little "he's a rapist" asterisk next to it, and not just because it's abhorrent on its own, but because it shows how far Hollywood will go to protect the worst of their own. But that doesn't mean that we should ignore or dismiss the merits of that work or stop watching it. But then you come back to the problem of support. Anytime you buy a Chinatown Blu-ray or watch the movie on Netflix, you're paying Polanski royalties, supporting his lavish European fugitive lifestyle and, according to multiple allegations, his continued pattern of sexually abusive behavior, which is obviously not okay. Some people will say that the solution to this dilemma is piracy. Knowing my stance on the subject, you can probably guess that I don't agree. Firstly, because in pirating a film or anime to spite the director, you're also stealing from everyone else who worked on it, and secondly, because if something is valuable enough to be worth your time, it's valuable enough to be worth your money. I mean, if you're protesting the Nestle Corporation, you don't go out and shoplift Nesquik, you choose not to buy it in a boycott, because that's what makes the point, that you're willing to forego something you enjoy to avoid supporting bad business practices or bad people. Stealing from people who have nothing to do with it, or even people who do, muddies the message. So then, maybe we should stop watching content from people we take issue with in protest. Maybe the principle's the same, although in practice it is slightly different. You can buy generic store-brand chocolate milk mix, but there's no store-brand Chinatown, or store-brand Kenshin, or store-brand MMO Junkie. If you want to protest creators like this, you will miss out on some good or even great stories. Your cultural landscape will be less rich and varied than it might otherwise be. I guess whether you're willing to deprive yourself like that for the sake of your principles, or whether you even think it's right to do so, will come down to the individual. Now, as for me, if the tone of this video hasn't made it clear already, I'm torn. I think it's important to avoid financially supporting bad people or giving undeserved platforms to bad ideas, but I also think it's important to let art stand on its own merits, to recognize artistic greatness when we see it, regardless of where it comes from, and to learn from it, even if we disagree with it. It's hard to reconcile those values. In general, I'm a proponent of the idea that we should hate the jerk, not the work, and vice versa. I might despise SAO, but from all outward appearances, I actually think Reki Kawahara is a pretty swell guy and I'd love to grab a beer with him sometime. But then, I personally benefit from that stance, don't I? I make art, or at least what I would consider to be art, and I also have opinions that would probably upset a large portion of my audience. I'm left-leaning. I support gay marriage, abortion, gun control, and taxing churches, values that many on the right see as evil or authoritarian, and I share those ideas on Twitter a lot, even if I do keep them mostly out of my videos. Yet some people out there see my stances on these subjects, disagree with me, and still choose to support my content because they enjoy it. I turned them down, but at one point the moderators of a right-wing Discord server asked if I'd like to partner with them because they enjoy my content, and when I told them about my views, they said they were irrelevant to why they were asking, they just like what I make. And I'd be lying if I said that I wasn't touched and I wasn't grateful for people who think that way. I'm also, a middle-class white dude living in Canada, which inherently colors my perspective on things like this and gives me a much greater tolerance for things that would be utterly horrifying to somebody less privileged than me. So, yeah, I would never say that my way of thinking about any subject is the only way that anybody's allowed to think about it, unless it's SAO. So, yeah, I don't know. Right now, it's something I take on a case-by-case basis, and I'll probably continue doing so for the foreseeable future. Now, as for the specific case that started me on this tangent, what do I think should happen to Yaginuma-san? Well, he should probably be fired because his actions are reflecting poorly on his employers. To be clear, I don't think that anyone should lose their job just for having a bad opinion, even a poisonous, ignorant one. And it would be one thing if he was just expressing his own thoughts privately with his friends, but publishing them on a media platform, particularly one that he's grown by showing production stills from the anime, has a negative impact on everyone he works with. It's selfish on his part, and I think that makes him a bad employee. At the very least, he should be barred from using Twitter for ever. That said, if he gets a chance to direct another show, I'll probably still watch it. Mainly because, well, I watch everything, but partly because he is a good director, and I kind of want to see what else he's capable of. Unless I change my mind on this by then, which I might very well do, because as I hope these last 15 minutes have demonstrated, it's a complicated problem without an easy answer. Although if you have reached an answer that works for you, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Just please keep the discussion civil. That's probably a bit naive of me to ask, but a man can dream. While you're down there, if you'd like to hear more of what I have to say about media, especially anime, then hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. I promise the rest of my videos won't be quite this contentious. Also, just as a quick explanation, this topic was fresh, so I decided to cover it now instead of waiting for Fanservice February to end. So just as a heads up, this and 2 other sponsored videos on the 13th and 27th are going to be breaking up the flow of Moe and Ecchi this month, and one of my planned Ecchi videos will probably bleed into March to compensate. Anyway, before I go, I want to say a quick thank you to my patrons for supporting me and allowing me to do big side projects like Ecchi Month and small one-off videos like this one. I really couldn't do it without all of you guys, and I can't thank you enough. My top patrons' names are on screen right now, and man, I really couldn't do it without all of you guys, so thank you. If you're not tired of hearing my voice yet, then click here for a video where I explain why High School of the Dead is actually a masterpiece, or click here for something that Google recommends. I don't know what that will be. I'm Geoff Thew, professional shitbag, signing out from my mother's basement.